I saw this person being very excited about the success of the lanternfly stomping campaign. And every time I see somebody talk about lanternflies, or I think about how that all went down, this like big push to educate people about this invasive species and encourage people to like, if you see one, take care of it, and the glee with which people adopted that, and like, good job, keep at it. But every time that I think about that, I end up thinking about wild horses. Because in the American West, wild horses are eco-terrorists with really good PR. Like, we think of the Mustang as like this quintessential symbol of Americana, but North America really doesn't have horses to that extent. The vast majority of those horses aren't native. They came over from Europe. They haven't been in the wild for more than a few generations, and there was never meant to be as many of them as there are right now. The number of wild horses out there are putting a huge strain on the resources in that environment. They cause all sorts of issues for local plants and animals. And yet, if you were to suggest, even just suggest, that we should do anything even reminiscent of a lanternfly campaign for wild horses, the reaction would be very different. And this isn't just speculation. Every time that somebody has tried to do something to meaningfully manage the threat that wild horses pose to that ecosystem, there has been such public outcry and like celebrities starting campaigns to advocate for the Mustangs that the Bureau of Land Management effectively just can't do anything at this point, and we're just letting that rip. Why is one invasive species that's causing a lot of problems something we are like thrilled for the chance to do violence on, and another one we are outraged by it? Just because horses happen to be one of the very few species that we have chosen to extend any sort of compassion to. It's just because we like them and we think they're beautiful and think of them as friends, and bugs don't really get that same treatment. To be clear, I also have those associations. I also feel uncomfortable thinking about what that could look like. But the truth is that that sort of like compassion that people have actually ends up putting these species into circumstances that are dangerous for them. The land that horses live on do not have enough resources to sustain them. Bureau of Land Management currently has to give water to these horses because there's no longer enough water where these wild animals live. And I've read interviews with people who are like monitoring that situation, and they've basically said that what they're waiting for is just for the situation to get bad enough that pictures start to come out of wild horses starving, and then those pictures will upset people enough that they'll make some big stink, and then more resources will get released for them to handle the situation. And like, again, that's not speculation, we've seen that happening. But that compassion is not thoughtful enough, doesn't go beyond a gut reaction enough for us to do anything to prevent things from getting to that point, to prevent that harm from ever happening. And so we're just waiting for something to get really terrible, and in the meanwhile, the horses are walking closer to that danger every day, and all sorts of other destruction is happening in the environment. So as sad as it is to think about what would have to happen to like rectify that problem, in my mind, it's like the sad thing has already happened. Like the irreparable changes that have been made to these ecoregions, that's already happened. Like that's the real tragedy. Introducing these species that are like innocent beings, didn't ask to be there, into an environment that was not prepared for and cannot sustain them, that's the tragedy. And now like we just have to decide how much more we want to let that continue. I'm not an ecologist. I'm not like saying I have the answers. I'm not advocating for anything except for maybe just some like introspection. Like, let's just reflect on like how thoughtful our empathy really is and how much space we have for nuance.